The message is 43 seconds long. It begins with the sound of a car door closing and traffic moving on a wet road somewhere in the background. Then, her voice. Calm, measured. The kind of calm that people who are trying very hard not to sound frightened sometimes achieve. She says she is fine. She says not to worry. She says she will call again in the morning, and then, before she hangs up, there is a pause of perhaps 2 seconds. And in those 2 seconds, a sound. Not a voice, not a word. Just a sound that her mother would spend the next 27 years trying to convince investigators meant something. On the morning of November 14th, 1996, in the town of Covington, Tennessee, population 11,000, a 31-year-old woman named Laurel Voss walked out of the Tipton County Public Library where she worked, got into her car, and drove away. She was expected at her mother's house for dinner. She never arrived. The voicemail she left at 5:52 that evening was the last time anyone heard her voice. That is not a story about a woman who simply drove away from her life. That is a story about a community that had placed its trust in exactly the wrong person, and about the 43 seconds of recorded audio that everyone dismissed, and one woman never could. And it would take 27 years, a retired detective's personal tape player, and a piece of technology that did not exist in 1996, to finally give Laurel Voss the truth she had tried to leave behind. But before we get to any of that, we have to go back to Covington in the fall of 1996. Because to understand what was on that tape, you first have to understand who Laurel was. Covington, Tennessee sits in the flat western part of the state, 40 miles north of Memphis, in the middle of cotton and soybean country that stretches out in every direction until the land meets the sky, with nothing to interrupt it. In the mid-1990s, it was the kind of place where the high school football team drew 1,000 people on Friday nights, and the diner on Washington Avenue had the same 2 waitresses it had hired in 1983. People did not lock their cars in the library parking lot. They left pie on each other's porches when someone's husband died. They knew each other the way that people who have nowhere else to go know each other, completely, and sometimes uncomfortably, and with a loyalty that held even when it probably shouldn't have. Laurel Voss had grown up here. She had gone to Covington High, graduated in 1983, taken her library science degree from the University of Memphis, and come straight back, which was not what everyone expected of her. She was the kind of person who could have gone somewhere larger and chosen not to. She was the children's and young adult librarian at the Tipton County Public Library, a position she had held for 8 years, and the teachers at the elementary schools around the county said that more than a few children who arrived in kindergarten not knowing a single book left her summer reading programs with a stack of favorites they could name by heart. She was 31 years old. She drove a green 1993 Honda Accord. She had a cat named Walter who sat in the front window of her apartment on Munford Avenue, and she had a habit of stopping at the Quick Sock on the way home every evening to buy a Diet Pepsi in a bottle, because she said cans tasted like aluminum and she could tell the difference. She called her mother, Diane Voss, every night between 8 and 9 o'clock, without fail. And she was raising her nephew. Her younger sister Pam had been diagnosed with lupus in 1993 and spent stretches of the following 2 years in and out of treatment in Memphis. During those stretches, Pam's son Marcus, 7 years old in 1996, with his mother's eyes and his aunt's habit of reading at the dinner table, lived with Laurel. Laurel had enrolled him in the school near her apartment. She went to his parent-teacher conferences. She kept a step stool under the bathroom sink so he could reach the faucet to brush his teeth. She told her mother she didn't mind. She said it in the tone of someone who genuinely meant it. That evening, she left work at 5:47. Linda Hollis, the circulation desk librarian, watched her push out through the glass front door and wave without turning around. It was the kind of wave that people give when they expect to be back the next morning. She was not back the next morning. Diane Voss called the Tipton County Sheriff's Office at 7:14 a.m. On November 15, 1996, she had waited through the night. She had called Laurel's apartment at 8 o'clock the previous evening and received no answer. She had called at 9. She had driven to the apartment on Munford Avenue at 10:30, knocked and received nothing, and stood on the landing for 10 minutes in the November cold before going home. She had not slept. She called the library first thing in the morning, was told Laurel had not come in, and then called the sheriff. The deputy who took the report asked whether Laurel had any reason to leave town suddenly. Diane said no. He asked if she had relationship troubles. Diane paused. Then she said there was an ex-boyfriend, someone Laurel had ended things with about 6 weeks earlier, but that it had been quiet since then. The deputy noted it. Investigators found the green Accord at 11:40 a.m. that same morning. It was parked in the gravel lot behind Tatum's Feed and Hardware on Highway 51, about 2 miles from the library. The engine was cold. The doors were unlocked. Laurel's work bag was in the back seat. Her Diet Pepsi bottle, empty, was in the cup holder. And on the passenger seat, face down, was a library book, a copy of The Secret Garden checked out on Laurel's card, with a bookmark about a third of the way through. She was not in the car. She was not near the car. She was not anywhere. The search expanded to the surrounding farmland and the creek bottoms south of the highway. Volunteers from the First Baptist and the American Legion both showed up by noon on the second day without being asked. By the end of the first week, nearly 300 people had walked the fields and the drainage ditches between Covington and the county line. They found nothing. The voicemail, the 43-second message Laurel had left on her mother's answering machine at 5:52 p.m. on the day she disappeared, was collected by investigators on November 15th. Detective Patricia Ames of the Tipton County Sheriff's Office listened to it twice in the presence of Diane Voss. She noted in her report that the call was made from a payphone on Highway 51, approximately a half-mile from where the Accord was eventually found. She noted that Laurel's voice was steady. She noted the ambient traffic noise. And she noted the sound at the end, the 2-second pause before the line went dead, as inconclusive. Inconclusive. That was the word. The ex-boyfriend's name was Gary Pruitt. He was 34 years old, a varsity football coach at Covington High School, broad-shouldered, with a handshake that people remembered and a way of making eye contact that felt, depending on who was doing the remembering, either very confident or very deliberate. He had dated Laurel for 14 months. The relationship had ended, by Laurel's account to her mother, because he had become possessive. She told Diane he had shown up at the library twice during her shift, without calling ahead. She told her he had gone through her phone while she was in the shower. She said that at some point that autumn she had started leaving her window shades down, even during the day. She had ended it in late September 1996, and she had told her sister Pam, in a phone call documented in the original case file, that she was relieved, but that she was also a little afraid of what came next. Pruitt was interviewed by Detective Ames on November 16th. He was cooperative, mournful in the way that people sometimes perform mournfulness when they are being watched. He said he and Laurel had parted on difficult terms, but that he bore her no ill will. He said he had been at football practice until 5:30 on November 14th, then at a coaches' meeting at the high school until 7. 3 assistant coaches confirmed the meeting. The athletic director confirmed practice. The timeline placed him 12 miles from the Highway 51 payphone during the window when Laurel's call was made. He was not arrested. He was asked to remain available. Detective Ames pushed. She requested telephone records for every landline associated with Pruitt and cross-referenced them against the payphone on Highway 51. She found nothing connecting him to that number in the weeks before the disappearance. She re-interviewed the 3 assistant coaches in January 1997. All 3 maintained the same account. She went back to Diane and asked if there were other men Laurel had mentioned, other acquaintances who had seemed off to her. Diane gave her 2 names, a neighbor who had made a comment once, a man from Laurel's gym who had asked her out twice after she said no. Both were investigated. Both were cleared by mid-February. The voicemail was played for 2 additional investigators, neither of whom flagged the sound at the end as anything other than ambient noise. The tape was logged into evidence and stored. In the spring of 1997, the investigation was formally deprioritized, which in practice meant it was placed in a file drawer and the active assignment was discontinued. A second set of investigators briefly reopened it in 1999 when a hunter found a woman's shoe in a field north of town. But the shoe was the wrong size, and the lead went nowhere. Ames retired from the Tipton County Sheriff's Office in 2004. She took one thing with her that was not technically hers to take: a dubbed cassette tape of Laurel Voss's 43-second voicemail. She told her husband, when he asked why, that she wasn't sure the second set of ears had ever really listened. Marcus Voss turned 18 in 2007. He had grown up watching his grandmother keep Laurel's case alive, the way some women keep a garden, quietly, doggedly, in the margins of an ordinary life. Diane had written to the Tipton County Sheriff's Office every November 15th since 1997. She had attended every community meeting about cold cases the county had organized. She had a folder of case notes 3 inches thick that she kept in the cabinet above her stove, and she updated it when she could. By 2000, 4 years after Laurel's disappearance, the missing persons flyers that had gone up in the windows along Washington Avenue had mostly come down. The churches that had organized searches had moved on to other needs. The Covington Herald had run anniversary pieces in 1997 and 1998, and then the coverage stopped, because there was nothing new to say, and editors have to make choices. By 2005, the Quick Sock on Munford Avenue had been torn down and replaced with a drive-through pharmacy. By 2010, the Tipton County Public Library had been renovated and rededicated, and the children's section where Laurel had worked for 8 years had been partially redesigned. A small framed photograph of Laurel remained on the staff recognition wall near the front desk. The librarian who kept it there said she didn't know exactly who had put it up and didn't intend to be the one to take it down. The Green Accord had been sold at a county impound auction in 1999. Nobody told Diane until after. Gary Pruitt coached football at Covington High until 2008, when he retired to care for an aging parent. He bought a house on the far north end of Covington, near the county line. He attended church. He sat in the stands at the high school homecoming games some years, the returned alumnus, the old coach. He was seen around town with the unremarkable regularity of a man who has nothing to hide, or who has convinced himself of the same. Marcus grew up, finished school, married, moved to Nashville. He had his aunt's habit of reading at the kitchen table. He called his grandmother every Sunday, because that was what he had been raised to understand a Sunday phone call meant. In 2015, Diane Voss wrote to the Innocence Project of Tennessee asking whether they had any resources or referrals for unresolved cold case families. She was directed to a volunteer organization called the Tennessee Cold Case Review Coalition. The coordinator who called her back spent 2 hours on the phone with Diane that first conversation and called again the following week. Her name was Sandra Okafor. She was a former forensic consultant and she had never heard Laurel's voicemail. She asked Diane if she still had a copy. Diane did not. But she knew who did. Sandra Okafor drove to Munford, Tennessee on a Saturday in February 2016 and sat across the kitchen table from Patricia Ames, who was 61 years old and had been retired for 12 years, and who pulled a cassette tape in a plastic case from a shoebox in the back of her hall closet without having to look for it. They played it 4 times. The sound at the end, the 2-second sound that Ames's original report had labeled inconclusive, was something Okafor recognized. Not from its sonic quality, which on a 20-year-old dubbed cassette was degraded enough to be ambiguous, but from context. From what Laurel had said in the seconds before it. The way the pause arrived, the specific cadence of a sentence that stops before it ends because the person speaking has decided, in real time, that finishing it would be dangerous. Okafor contacted the Forensic Audio Laboratory at Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro. The process they used to analyze the tape, a technique involving spectral enhancement of degraded analog recordings, which in plain language means digitally cleaning the audio to recover sounds buried beneath tape hiss and background noise, had only become widely available to civilian cold case review in the previous several years. The university's lab had used it on 4 cases before Laurel's. The enhanced audio took 11 weeks to process. When Okafor received the results in May 2016, she called Patricia Ames first. Then she drove back to Covington and sat across the table from Diane Voss. She set the results on the table between them. Diane picked them up. She read the transcript of the enhanced audio. She set it down again. She did not cry right away. She sat for a while with her hands flat on the table. The 2-second sound at the end of Laurel's voicemail was a voice. A male voice, saying a single name. His own. Gary Pruitt had spent 20 years embedded in the ordinary life of Covington, Tennessee, with the patience and consistency of a man who had long since decided that patience and consistency were all that stood between him and exposure. He had coached a generation of boys. He had attended the funerals of men he had known since childhood. He had nodded at Diane Voss across the parking lot at the Piggly Wiggly on at least 4 occasions, and said hello in the tone of a man who feels nothing in particular. He had, according to multiple neighbors interviewed by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation in the spring of 2016, never once mentioned Laurel Voss's name in a conversation, unless someone else brought it up first. When they did, he called it a tragedy. He said she was a good person. He said he hoped someday there would be answers. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation opened a formal reinvestigation in April 2016 based on Sandra Okafor's submission of the enhanced audio transcript. Detective Ames was brought in as a civilian consultant. The reinvestigation produced, over the following 7 months, a reconstruction of the afternoon of November 14, 1996, that differed from the original timeline in one critical respect. The alibi, the coaches' meeting, had been confirmed by 3 witnesses who were also Gary Pruitt's subordinates, and who, when interviewed separately in 2016, each produced slightly different accounts of when the meeting had actually ended. One of them said 7 o'clock, as before. One said it was closer to 6:30. The third said he wasn't sure. He said it had been 20 years, and he had told the detective what Gary told him to tell the detective, and he was tired of carrying it. Gary Pruitt was arrested on November 13, 2023, one day before the 27th anniversary of Laurel's disappearance, at his home on the north end of Covington. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation had spent the intervening 7 years building the case, locating Laurel's remains on a property adjoining land that had once been owned by Pruitt's family. and securing a DNA confirmation in 2021 using forensic genealogy methods that traced biological material found at the site back to Laurel's family line. He did not speak when the agents arrived. He looked at them from the doorway of his house for a long moment. Then he stepped outside, and the door closed behind him, and 27 years of silence became, in that moment, the loudest thing in Covington. He was charged with first-degree murder. He entered a guilty plea in October 2024 and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. At sentencing, Diane Voss read a statement. She was 78 years old. She stood without notes. She spoke for 4 minutes. She did not address Gary Pruitt once. She spoke entirely to Laurel. She told her about Marcus, who was 35 now and had 2 daughters of his own. She told her about the step stool, which she still had. She told her the photograph on the library wall was still there. She said, "I told them the tape meant something. I told them from the first day." She had told them. There is a photograph of Laurel Voss taken at the Tipton County Public Library's summer reading program in 1995. She is sitting cross-legged on the floor of the children's section, surrounded by approximately 20 children ranging in age from 5 to 10. Holding up a picture book with both hands so the children on either side of her can see the illustrations. Her face is turned slightly toward the nearest child, a small boy who is laughing at something on the page. She is laughing too. She looks like someone who has found the exact place she is supposed to be. The 43-second voicemail that Laurel left for her mother on the evening of November 14, 1996, is the reason this case was ultimately solved. She made that call knowing she was in danger. She made it from a payphone on a highway because she did not want to make it from inside her car. She said the things she said in the order she said them because she was choosing her words in real time, calmly, for someone who might need to hear them later. And in the last 2 seconds, when the voice came from outside the phone booth, she made the only decision she had time to make. She kept the line open just long enough. She was 31 years old. She had a library full of children who remembered her. She had a nephew she was helping raise. She had a mother who called the sheriff at 7 in the morning because she knew, the way that mothers know things, that something was wrong. The Laurel Voss case is now used in training materials for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Cold Case Unit as an example of the significance of ambient audio in recorded evidence. The Tipton County Sheriff's Office revised its protocol for the preservation of voicemail evidence in 2024. Whether those changes save another family the 27 years that Diane Voss lost is a question that cannot be answered yet. What can be said is that a woman who understood she was in danger found a way to say his name. And the truth she left behind on a cassette tape in a shoebox on a closet shelf held on for 27 years, waiting for someone with the right tools and the willingness to listen. Some things refuse to go quiet. Before you go, do you think the original 1996 investigators should have pursued the voicemail further? And what would you have done differently? The 3 coaches who provided Gary Pruitt's alibi, one eventually told the truth after 20 years. What do you think kept the other 2 silent? And what does this case say about the women who go home and listen to the tape again, long after the department has moved on? Justice found Laurel Voss after 27 years. Stories like hers, and the people who refused to put the tape back in the shoebox, are exactly why this channel exists. If you believe the truth is worth pursuing, no matter how long it takes, subscribe and stay with us. More cases are waiting in the description below. Thank you for being here.